Hello, folks, and welcome to today's special webinar event on secure data access across the life cycle of your system. Today's webinar is sponsored by HPE and AMD and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is James Green. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I am really looking forward to moderating this event today. Before we dig into the meat of the presentation here, I've just got a few housekeeping things to go over with you. First of all, obviously, we want you to get a lot out of the time that you're spending here today. And so we got some resources to share with you and some ways for you to interact with us and make sure you get the most out of it. There is a questions panel here in your webinar console where you can submit your questions to us. And we're going to be taking those as we can throughout the event, but also we're going to have a dedicated Q&A session at the end where we're going to take as many questions as we have time left to get to. So please find that questions section, and as they come up for you, submit those questions to us. Also, there's a handouts section, and if you click into that tab, the handouts and questions sections are two different tabs. If you click into that tab, you'll find a bunch of handouts there for you. Some notable ones include some information on the HPE and AMD partnership and the EPIC solutions that you're going to be hearing about today. There's a link to a great blog post about that partnership and specifically about security at the server level that you probably want to check out. Great PDF in there on ransomware data recovery architectures, and also a white paper from More Insights and Strategy on how HPE enables zero trust security and architecture. So scroll through there, check all that stuff out, all good stuff. And then one last thing, you probably already know this, but at the end of this webinar, we're going to be giving away a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee. Of course, you must be here on the event live to be eligible to win that prize. And there are a few more like fine print official terms and conditions. If you want to check those out, there's a link to that in the handouts section as well, where you can view the full prize terms and conditions. Finally, to go back to the questions thing for a minute, because we find it to be such a useful part of this experience to get your questions and then respond to them, we want to incentivize you to really think about it and ask great questions. And so to that end, we're also going to be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card to the attendee that asks the best question. So hopefully that motivates you to think about what you're hearing, ask some good questions, and to whoever asks the best one, we're going to be sending you a $50 Amazon gift card. So with that, let's do some quick intros on our presenters, and then we're going to get into the meat of the presentation. Two different presenters you're going to be hearing from today: Joe Vidal, Master Technologist in the Office of the CTO at HPE, and then John Hampton, Senior Director of Worldwide Customer Field Support at AMD. Both great speakers, lots of knowledge, and I think you're really going to enjoy what you're going to hear from these guys. And again, as we go, ask questions. I'm going to be in the chat trying to answer some of these. If there's anything I can speak to, there's also a handful of other people in the background here to answer your questions. So please ask those, and then at the end, I'll be back to chat with Joe and John about some questions live. So with that, why don't you guys take it away?
Well, thanks, James, and thanks for that great introduction. I'm glad to be here with John. Joe Vidal. I've been with HPE, as you heard, for a long, long time, 31 years, between the channel and the entire company, in all our various names. In fact, we're going to talk about some of that history in a second, but really glad to be here to talk about securing data across the life cycle of your systems. And talking about that history, John, you and I have been here with our collective companies, AMD and HP, or HPE, since the split of HPI and HPE back in 2015. The history really began before 2004, because obviously back in those days, we were even Compaq and HP, and we had AMD in our laptops and our desktops, right? But when we came together in 2004, as the history shows on this slide, it was really the first time that we brought a server, we're going to call it commercial enterprise ready server class 64 and 32-bit chip to the enterprise server space, right? And that
That's
was
right.
really exciting. Talk us through this just a little, John, and I'll add in some here too. But going back to
Right.
2004, when we came out with that first server, what did that feel like from an AMD perspective when we brought that out together and kind of wowed everyone and certainly leapfrogged Intel at that same time?
Yeah, it's such a fun topic, Joe. We could talk about this stuff all day. It's because this is what we're passionate about. Both of our companies and our partnership are really founded on innovation. That's what we focus on. That's what we are here to deliver. And really, between HPE and AMD, really push innovation forward. And we're actually going to talk about not only what we've done, but more importantly, where we're going and why it makes sense for you here. But to your point, I have now been at AMD for over 2 decades, so I have seen some incredible innovation that our partnership has delivered. And you got to start with 2004, like you said, when we really delivered that first wave of servers. And what an incredible feeling that was, because we knew at that time that that was the clear direction that the whole industry was going, how important it was, and to do something like that together, to be able to deliver that type of important innovation is so meaningful, right? And again,
Right.
all of this has to translate to what you all need. And so that's really what we thrive on, is how do we improve each generation. And for me, it's I'm just proud to be a part of a company that's founded on innovation. Our heritage is really continuing to push forward technology. And so some incredible things that AMD's been able to bring to the industry. You recall, Joe, and in that similar time frame where we really pushed the industry towards x86 64, first
That's right.
64-bit, very much changed the direction of the entire industry at that point in time. We think about the days of Opteron, where we
That's
had
right.
leadership, performance, leadership, efficiency, performance per watt, really changed the game in that time frame as well. And you can just see just over time how we've really been able to ramp here. It's just so fun to look back on all of those milestones
That's
during
right.
our careers.
And the nice thing is that AMD enabled HP at the time. Now you know us as HPE, but HP at the time to deliver a 64-bit processor in an x86 system that previously had been relegated to 32-bit workloads. Right now, I do it
Right.
with quotes because people looked at us back then. There were religious battles going on, right, between the Unix camp, the Windows camp, and they were looking at x86 and 32-bit as if it wasn't 64-bit, it wasn't real computing at the time. It wasn't bleeding edge, certainly. And so AMD allowed HP to really compete in that space with something that then allowed us to add in things like hot plug RAM, hot plug, we already had hot plug hard drives, we had hot plug fans. We were adding hot plug resiliency and added availability to this x86 32-bit, now 64-bit extensions and full 64-bit running computing space. And you continue now with exceeding the security, expectations, right? And adding more security capability and leading with Cray supercomputing, right? And we'll talk about this, as we've gone through all the different flavors of capabilities that we've added into the EPYC. We're going to say that the EPYC processor has enabled us to put in our servers, right? We have so many different variants of servers from HPE that have AMD in them now. And you look at the SVT 325, the Apollo 9000, the Cray EX series, the Cray C1000s, and the DX 385, which of course is our Nutanix-based appliance on a DL 385, right, with Opteron.
Right.
And now you'll see it this year now, driving the controller that's in the Electra series, right? This is giving us that highest end 6 nines of availability and storage and 100% availability in the Electra 9000. Again, these are things that nobody else is doing in the space. And as we look
Yeah.
at what this looks like in products, right, across the Cray supercomputer family to the Apollo family with extremely dense storage, that allows us to put one processor or two processors. Again, we'll talk about what the difference is in allowing us to have that single processor, yet have the entire memory footprint up to 8 terabytes of RAM, all mapped to a single processor, and what that does to the economics and performance or scale out in a storage perspective. It's huge, right? We
Yeah.
can't do that anywhere else.
Right.
And then I know you have a little processor that you wanted to share
Mhm.
here. So let me let you talk about that.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why we've seen the portfolio grow so much recently, Joe, to your point, is because of new innovation. Again, going back to that point, going into the 2017 timeframe, as you saw in that previous chart, there was a major inflection point that took place when AMD delivered a brand new CPU architecture known as Zen, right? And so
Mhm.
that's why we call this a new era, the Epic era. We launched Epic back in that time frame, and when we did so, we really brought back much needed innovation, really pushing our competition, pushing the industry forward. And beyond that, we ultimately also took the lead in process technology for the first time in industry history. A lot of people never thought that that would happen, but combining the Zen architecture and the process technology, and as you said, Joe, just showing you a chip here, we've actually done some incredible innovation at a packaging level. We've
Mm.
moved to this new chiplet architecture that allows us to really take a flexible modular approach. You think about AMD now, we have CPUs, we also have GPUs. We actually also just completed the largest acquisition in semiconductor history this past week with Xilinx. So imagine all of the different IP, all the different innovation that we have to work with. Having this chiplet packaging innovation allows us to leverage all those and bring them into a very seamless chip design. We've got
That's right.
people, yeah, right,
And you know what's really interesting when you say chiplet? Every time I hear somebody talk about chiplet, for those of you following along at home here, the first thing that pops in my mind is chiclets, right? And chiclets, we
right,
chew through chiclets, and they're great. They're chewing gum. Well, just like chiplets, chew through your computing code and your application needs, right? They're going to allow you to chew through those applications,
I like
and
that.
not only that, save you time, save you money. So they are actually nearly equivalent, chiplet and chiclet. Just remember that.
Yeah, and I think the other point, when you look at that portfolio again, Joe, the important point here is this is a highly scalable architecture that we've designed. So you showed some
That's
one
right.
P designs in the portfolio with the entry space, right? We're going to talk about how we can help support you all with economics. But ranging from that 1P kind of entry space all the way through to supercomputing. And I'm proud to say that HP and AMD are leading the way today with supercomputing. In fact, the
Absolutely.
largest supercomputer in the world, known as Frontier, is powered by AMD and HPE. It's staggering to think about what we've done here, Joe, but we've
That's right.
ushered the industry into the exascale era.
I was going to say, and Frontier is going to be scaling to 1.5 exaflops, right? We're
Incredible.
not talking
Right.
100 teraflops or 150 teraflops, which is what the previous
Right.
supercomputer benchmarks were. We're now into the exaflop era,
Right.
and that's just massive
Yeah.
supercomputing, right? Will be approaching quantum computing here in the next few
Right.
years, which is going to take us to an entirely different genre of thought capability and questions that we don't even know to ask yet
That's
of
right.
the applications and the software, right? So speaking of which, let's talk about some of the other workloads, right?
Yes.
And when we look at the right workloads to target for the capabilities that we now have in the Reliant server family powered by AMD EPYC, right? We've already talked a little bit about AI and machine learning, and that's kind of the sexiness, right? When in 2022, when I look at the new application targets and the areas where people are wanting to push some of their IT funding, it's around leveraging AI for better business insights. However, there's the basic stuff that we're blocking and tackling that we're still doing because of COVID, right? Which is virtualization and VDI. So, John, I know
Right.
you had a few things you wanted to share there. Go ahead.
Well, this is what it's really all about. That this is why it's important. Our innovation is fantastic, but what does it mean to you all? Well, it's about your workloads. And so both AMD and through our partnership with HPE, we've really taken big steps towards technology that's optimized for your workloads. And so to your point, Joe, we listen every day to what our biggest customers' needs are. Where do we really need to improve? Where do we need to put more focus? And so that's really what this portfolio is now. It's grown, but more importantly, it's a big step towards your applications, your workloads, and optimizations have already taken place right out of the box for those workloads. So you mentioned virtualization. Of course, that's seen a ton of growth over the
Mhm.
pandemic. I don't need to tell you all that, but we've actually become more and more dependent on the data center during the
Absolutely.
pandemic. We think about the live video conferences like this, well, that needs back-end infrastructure. We think about all the remote workforce, remote education, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
Well, and
really
the best way to
important.
lock those things down
Yeah.
in a remote workforce
Yes,
is using VDI, right?
that's right.
And the beginning of COVID, a year and a half ago, now almost 2 years ago now, forced a lot of people to VDI infrastructure, and they weren't ready for it. They didn't know how to do
Yeah,
it, right? But we quickly
right.
enabled them to do that. And what does VDI need? VDI needs more compute and more memory. Doesn't
Right.
necessarily need more storage, because there's a lot of the same application blocks are being utilized by every one of the VDI users, right? But
Right.
you need more storage, you need, I'm sorry, you need more memory, and you need more processor space. And that's certainly one of the things that AMD enables us to do. And that kind of takes me to database, right? Database, again, more memory, more memory, more memory, more memory, and a
Yeah.
little more compute space, right? To crunch that information brand together, but
Right.
also more storage and more IO. So I need more
Right.
IO capability, and I need more memory with database, which again is a great target for AMD. And this is why it's great for SAP HANA, SAP HANA 4, and all, and several other application stacks we'll talk about in just a second. But let me just
Right.
drive down through big
Yeah.
data analytics, right?
Right.
When you talk about big data analytics, now this is something where I'm going to do a whole lot of multi-threading. I'm going to need a lot of cores, right?
Right.
So I need those 60 plus cores, right, to be able to do that big data analytics and IO capacity and those PCIe 4.0 lanes. And I thought we had PCIe 5.0 lanes there, but I may be mistaken here. Nonetheless, we're going there, right, with
We
Gen
are
11.
going there.
Yes, we're
Yeah.
going there with Gen 11. I know it's the future that I see. Yeah.
Yes, we do live in the future, Joe. And but I mean, to your point, we were actually first to market to bring PCI Gen 4 together. So there is IO leadership there. And frankly, we think we can maintain that leadership moving into the next generation.
Absolutely. And we certainly talked about the high performance computing. So let's talk about some of the other
Yeah,
applications specifically that
right.
are tiered here for either the financial or the technical space. When we're looking at an as a service cloud experience, which is certainly one of the things that HPE has been talking about with GreenLake, the cloud that comes to you, right? And it doesn't force you to choose, from traditional IT or public cloud. You can do both. But the key here is that I want to be able to do it with a lower total cost of ownership. I want to do it with a more secure experience, and I want to do it with the same economics. And that's certainly, once again, one of the things that AMD enables us to do. Two things: security and economical savings, as well as that performance boost that we talked about. So John,
Right.
I know you had some great examples here as we talked through financial and technical markets and the application set. So let me let you jump in here.
Yeah. So look, there's a lot of different technology and innovation advantages that we do bring. We are quite differentiated. You mentioned a few, Joe. I mean, the core density that we bring, certainly we have the highest core count available in the market. That's going to continue to get better moving into the future with AMD. Certainly strengths around memory bandwidth, IO is all important, but it has to lend itself towards your workloads. And so I love what GreenLake is doing here, and in this partnership around having performance, it's workload optimized and doing it as a service. We're going to get into this further, but we're dramatically changing the game with respect to economics. We're able to very significantly lower virtualization licensing costs. We're going to talk through
And I'm
that.
going to step us through the next slide because it really
Yeah,
kind of helps talk through that. Go ahead.
that's perfect. Yeah, so we'll definitely go through this, but these are just the very simple ways that HPE and AMD are winning in the market today. And really is the first is being able to help you lower your licensing costs. We think about that single socket design, Joe, that we talked about.
Mhm.
Imagine the ability to, first stating the obvious, lower your hardware-based costs. But then
Right.
on top of that, you're still delivering, in many cases, better than a lot of the existing two-piece solutions that are out there. So you've got the performance you need, but you're reducing your hardware costs, further reducing your licensing costs. Whether that's done by socket or by core, regardless of how you slice it, we are dramatically lowering that. And so you can see some of the specific numbers that we're talking about here, up to 20% lower hardware, 50% lower licensing costs. That's a game
Yeah.
changer. And so That's
Yeah, and let's
an
face it, some
example.
of these software
Right.
licenses cost more than the hardware itself, right?
It's true. It's
So,
true.
we know that we used to call it the VM tax, and I hate to use that term, but let's face it, it's true, right?
Right.
And then when we look at price performance,
Yeah.
for those applications that are limited processor or platform capabilities, we have the third gen EPYC, right? 15% better price performance and
Right.
50% more performance on AMD EPYC with vSphere 7, which is
Yeah. That's
huge.
right.
I
That's
mean,
right. And look, I mean, we're quite proud of what we've been able to do. A lot of the success we've had is based on price performance. In fact, closing our last financial quarter, hit the largest market share on record. But let me just say this, humbly speaking, all of our financial success, what it really means is the ability to reinvest back into our partnership with HPE, back into our innovation, so that we can continue to change the way economics are viewed, change the way price performance is viewed. And so with our third gen EPYC, that is exactly how we're doing this. And again, we have consultants on my team. Certainly, you get the pre-sales organization at HPE that can help consult you on the right solution for you. We can help you with modeling. We have a virtualization TCO tool that we can use to really just make sure that based on your workloads, what you care about, what your budget looks like, that we find the right solution. And Joe, I'm quite confident that we can deliver that industry-leading price performance.
absolutely. And we have several reference architectures that help guide you to the right solution and making that decision easy. And speaking of easy in decisions, the other biggest thing, the top thing that's on the top of minds of every CIO and certainly every CISO out there is our third bullet point here, which is security, right? And when it comes to security, financial loss is not something you want to deal with. You don't want to be that next top line name on the first page of the newspaper or magazine or the internet, right? So when it comes to enhanced security, and this is really one where AMD has absolutely hands down been leading the foray here and helping HPE. We're going to say lock down our portfolio, right? We came out with that silicon root of trust back about 3.5 years ago with Gen 10, and it's further made, I'm going to say, solid or lockdown or secure. And we're going to talk through the multiple layers of the application stack up into the workload here is really enabled by AMD's additional capabilities in the security space, right? We created a digital fingerprint with silicon root of trust that guarantees that you can't hack the firmware itself, right? And it's not just the baseboard firmware, but all the firmware. We'll talk about that in just a second. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about all the world records that you guys have helped us achieve, right? 32 world records, right, John? And that's huge. That's not something to scoff at or laugh at, right? Decades of engineering went into tweaking these systems so that they were optimized to perform in each of these various areas, whether it was big data analytics, Java execution engines, cloud and virtualization, energy efficiency, and of course, SDI, enterprise software-defined infrastructure in the enterprise space. John, tell us something about your perspective on what these world records mean and how we achieved them.
Well, results speak, right? It's important that we do prove this out to the industry that what we're saying is absolutely true. It's one thing to just say, well, we have performance leadership, et cetera, but to prove it out and show world record breaking performance. And to your point, not only just raw performance, but performance per watt, energy efficiency as well. So we're really trying to give the best of both worlds. We know a lot of you are not only focused on ramping up your performance on your workloads, but also improving energy efficiency. We have more and more conversations around sustainability, such an important topic. So we're finding that balance. That's an important point to pull out of this. But look, we're going to continue to do this. We're quite proud of this, but never satisfied. Like, what can we do with our next generation to further ramp these performance? Records are meant to be broken, and that's what we're working on right now.
That's right. And you know what, you hit on something, John, and it hits to the heart of HP, and the compact legacy from where we started. and that is that compute matters, right? We're continuing to ensure that the compute platforms aren't something that are just set aside. It's an afterthought. Oh yeah, we need a computer to make this run, right? But hey, they're all the same, right? There's no real value add in there. Well, you know what? That's wrong, right? There's plenty of value add in here, especially when it comes to what AMD is adding here, and of course now also what HPE is adding from a securities perspective. So if it's okay, I'm going to talk just a few minutes here. We've got about 11 more minutes or so, and I just want to spend the last 10 minutes or so talking about what's top of mind for everybody, and that's security. When we look at some of the issues that our CIOs and our CFOs, because the chief financial officer is the risk manager, right? He's the one, or she is the one, worried about how much is it going to cost the company if we get hacked, or if our data gets copied, if our customers' information is made public. It's almost immeasurable in some cases. And when you look at some of the names that are on here, from SolarWinds to Supermicro to you name it, right? These are companies that were hacked, unfortunately. And they were hacked using either cryptojacking or mosaic regressor or trick boot, or, well, let's just talk about some of the most recent ones, which is DrovaRub and FinSpy. Now, DrovaRub sounds kind of funny, but it's actually a Russian term. DrovaRub is the number one or number two most popular hacking package that's available for download on the dark web for free. And actually, for as little as $2,000, you can pay somebody to hack your competitor. This is it's big business for these people. There are literally millions of hackers from Russia and another couple million in China using this new hacking package FinSpy that unfortunately came from our own intelligence agencies, that was reverse engineered by the Chinese, added in a boot element to allow you to put a bootloader in a fake boot image, as long as it's not been certified. And the key is here that what HPE and AMD have been able to add into our enterprise class servers is the ability to add, first off, we have a trusted supply chain capability, right? Which means that where our systems are manufactured, everybody there has had a background check. The entire process is secured and overseen and certified. Then we add an infrastructure layer of trust on top of that. That's that silicon root of trust, where we're locking down the firmware, and I'll go into details on that in the next slide. But then we add an OS trust, or a certified operating system that has now been stamped and has a secured, we're going to call it encrypted fingerprint that ensures that that boot image can't be faked, right, or falsified. Then we have a platform layer of trust and a workload layer of trust that actually comes from AMD. And we'll see that here on the next slide. But the bottom line is that each of these layers is predicated upon the security of the layer below them. If you have any one layer that doesn't have 100% security, then that's the weakest link in the chain, and the whole thing falls apart, right? So, and this is why when we look at some of the other platforms out there that aren't secured the way the HPE systems are, with our silicon root of trust securing everything in the system and every piece of hardware, not just the UEFI BIOS, but all of the option ROMs as well, right? So when we look at everything we're doing here, and then the secured memory encryption, John, let me let you jump in back here. So we have, you guys have the AMD secure processor. We've got the AMD, the silicon root of trust that's below that, checking the processor, checking the BIOS, checking that every few seconds. We're checking the OS image every 24 hours. We're not going to accidentally boot an illegal OS, right? We're not going to accidentally boot an illegal firmware. We can't do that physically, right? We're going to catch that. But what is it that AMD is adding on top of that in the secure encrypted virtualization layer and the memory encryption layer?
Yeah, Joe, it's so important that we nail the foundation here. That's the silicon root of trust that we're talking about. A house is only as strong as its foundation.
Right.
So true. And so HP and AMD truly are leading the industry in security. And this is how we've done it. They're showing you the specifics of how we partner together. HPE, obviously, you have your ILO, we have our secure processor, and bringing those two together forms industry-leading silicon root of trust. The AMD secure processor is actually a separate coprocessor that we've engineered and integrated into each of our EPYC CPUs, all into one single chip design. That's actually fundamentally very different than our competition. And so It's important to understand that. And you can see that how we move through the authentication process as you're going through a boot process to ensure all those checkpoints are in place. And so this is so important. Joe, you talked about all of those threats that are out there. We pulled our customers, they said security is either number one or number two top priority for their next data center refresh. But then when we asked them, are you confident in what you have deployed today to protect yourselves? Most of them said they weren't. That's why we're here talking with you all today. And it's so real. I mean, just to touch on this for just a moment, if I may, Joe, it's
Absolutely.
actually really become an emotional topic for so many of us, right? No one likes to be vulnerable.
Nope.
No one likes to be taken advantage of. Our customers have worked hard to establish their businesses, their brands. Many of you here listening have personally invested your careers, your livelihood. No one should be able to take that away. We need to protect our customers. That's why we've gone to extra links here with multiple layers of silicon root of trust here. And as you can see, Joe, we've called out some of the predominant threats that are out there. And it's important to note that HP and AMD, because of the differences in how we've designed an AMD secure processor and partnered with HPE, we're simply not susceptible to them.
That's right. And you know what, the secured and encrypted execution space, the secured and encrypted memory space, right? The secured and encrypted bus and communication capability is something that's certainly leading the industry. I know Intel's trying to play catch up here, but AMD's led this charge, and you guys actually released this capability within the EPYC processor. How long has it been? 2 years ago now?
Yeah, we've actually iterated on this in each generation. Our third gen EPYC is actually now moved to a more advanced secure encrypted virtualization with secure nested paging, which gives you another layer of protection at the hypervisor level. But this is so important. We were actually first to market with SEV and SME. It's important that when you get to that layer, application layer, that there's more security in place. And so we already talked about how important virtualization is today. You have to make sure you have encryption in place to protect yourselves in that environment.
That's right.
And so critical.
That's right.
Right.
And thank you, John. And when you look at, first off, the biggest one that was probably the most visible was the Meltdown variant, right?
Right.
And Meltdown variant 3 and the previous Meltdown variants that actually access the shared cache space of the processor. So in virtualization, you have multiple VMs, but they're sharing a shared cache. Right now, we have a secured cache layer and a security layer that either allows or disallows the various virtual machines to have access to that area of cache or area of memory. So it ensures that that actually isn't a shared cache unless the security bit has been flipped and they're allowed to share that. And that's huge, right? And that's now done at the processor level from, as you mentioned, from your actual separate security coprocessor that sits on, are you calling it on the processor option package? It's not necessarily on die, right?
Correct. And what's important to understand is when we turn on that AMD secure processor, it's before we ever even boot up the traditional x86 CPU. So you could put those checkpoints in place at the UEFI BIOS working with the ILO before you ever start that boot sequence to ensure everything looks good, no threats are present, et cetera. So it's an important distinction.
Yeah, and the key is because some of these security variants here, not Fowlant Rambly, but some of the other ones that I talked about earlier, like FinSpy, and like Grover Rub, attempt to overwrite and pre-write at the kernel level 0 at the execution before the OS boots, the capability of overwriting and rewriting the prioritization and the security permissions level. And so your secure processor capability, basically precludes that and ensures that that does not happen because it kicks in first.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, there's so many important conversations that we need to have here. It's our job to bring forward protections and again, innovation in the realm of security. Secure memory or encryption is another one I would mention at that physical layer. So many of you are using a colo or you're a third party for your data center.
Right.
Frankly, over the pandemic, there's a lot of stories of people getting physical access to the data center. So having memory encryption really prevents being able to get important data or IP off of the memory. But just taking this one step further, Joe, I think that one of the call to action here is let's work together on this. We have to stay ahead of these threats that are out there. And I might just start by saying it's so important that you have confidence in your hardware-based security, your root of trust that we just talked about. HP and AMD are leading the way. We can help consult you on so many other things you need to be thinking about with respect to security, a zero trust framework, end-to-end encryption we touched on,
Absolutely.
doing security assessments, forensic audits, doing end-user training, testing, perhaps even using AI and ML. We could talk all day about this, but we need to be having those conversations. This
Absolutely.
webinar here is really a plea to you all to bring in your partners so that we can work this together. And coming back to that call to action, again, we're going to bring forward industry-leading security, but we're also going to layer in, as we said, performance leadership and economics that are truly changing the game, bringing it back to that story of innovation, Joe.
That's right.
We're not satisfied yet. We have
No.
plans we're working on to further advance in these three areas.
That's right. And saving people money is kind of table stakes, right? But security is top of mind. It's number one for all CEOs and all CIOs and certainly all CISOs, right? Because security is everything for them. But security is number one. Performance then to be able to keep up with the competition, stay ahead of the competition, right? And bring insights and better insights to the business to make you more competitive and make you more profitable. And then that drives the economics. So I know we covered a lot here, John, and I want to thank everybody out there for playing along with us at home. And we're going to open it up for Q&A. And I think we turn it back to James for Q&A at this point. So on behalf of Hewlett Packard Enterprise and on behalf of AMD, I want to say thank you very much for spending the time with us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen. And we do have fair bit of time here. We can work on some questions and lots of good questions to work on. So looking forward to digging in with you here. So let's start with this one, which I think we knew was coming. John, I'm going to direct this question your way. You talked a lot about ways that AMD has led over the history that you shared there. Lots of questions about, can you comment on CPU innovations and what to expect in the future? And I know that's sort of sensitive in the semiconductor industry, but with regard to what you can say, what should people maybe expect to see coming down the road?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Thanks for bringing that one forward. And this is frankly the most common question that I do get. We're all, as we said during the webinar, Joe and I were laughing about it. We do live in the future. And look, our competition has been very active in the press. And so let me just touch on this. Again, AMD is a very humble company. The success that we have is going to get fueled right back into our technology, our roadmap, and our innovation. So let me share some of the things that we've done. We've absolutely doubled down on our roadmap, and we have released some new information that I can share with you. So most importantly, we have now announced some details around our 4th generation EPYC, codenamed Genoa. And let me just say, I firmly believe that we can sustain, if not increase, our leadership in multiple different areas here. Genoa, just from a pure spec perspective, will now offer up to 96 cores, 12 DDR5 memory channels, which PCIe Gen 5, like Joe and I mentioned. It's going to move to actually 5 nanometer. So what that means is AMD will maintain leadership in process technology. That then allows us to deliver more efficient CPUs to the market. So we think that all of this translates to ongoing leadership in process technology, performance, core density and memory bandwidth, like I mentioned, and power efficiency. And so it's actually quite exciting. In many ways, the best is yet to come. And we're happy to work with you all out there to better understand what this new Gen 4 technology means for your workloads and work with you on finding the right solutions. The other thing I may just add to this is, the question was about CPUs, but we're very much looking to expand into more markets now following our Xilinx acquisition and through our AMD Instinct data center GPUs. What that means is more data center accelerators, and it can help us advance more in things like artificial intelligence. So it's very exciting that we have this new set of technologies to work with. I mentioned that flexible packaging innovation and the chiplets. So just imagine all the possibilities we have going further into the future to bring all of that technology together. So I hope that that provides some good context for where we're going.
It definitely does, and sounds exciting. Some of those like speeds and feeds numbers you were sharing are just boggling my mind. Um, Before we go into the next one, I'm just going to throw up a poll question for those of you who are hanging out. If you would just take a moment to look at this poll question while we keep going, we're just wondering if there's any ways that we can continue to support you in the things you're looking at here. So let us know. I love some of these questions. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Either of you, if you want to take a stab at this, go ahead. Jay is asking, how do you manage productivity against security? So there's always this friction, right? Like the more we lock something down to
Mhm.
make it secure, the harder it is to work, or at least that's how it has been in some cases. How do you guys see that? And I guess a question, add-on question from me is that balance changing, and are we able to perhaps be very secure without hindering productivity more so than in the past?
Well, let me take a stab at that one, if you don't mind, John. So, great question, folks. And I would say, first and foremost, if you can do it in hardware, do it in hardware. Then again, I'm the hardware guy, right? But I didn't start out as a hardware guy. And this is Joe speaking. You know, AMD's secure processor capability or secure, sub processor capability takes all of that workload off of the primary CPU. So you're not taking a CPU workload away or taking any extra CPU cycles away from, say, potential VMs, for instance, right? You're also doing that automatically by the computer. So you're freeing up the admins that would normally have to do these things manually. There are certain things when, if you don't have secure processor capability, for instance, you don't have something like our silicon root of trust that's constantly ensuring that your firmware isn't being hacked, then you're going to be relegated to ensuring that the OS that was booted is in fact the original OS that you installed on that system, that the firmware is the original firmware. In many cases, people have no idea that the firmware was replaced until at which point they're actually told that their data has been encrypted and they're being held ransom. And only then do they find out that, oh yeah, there was a SamSam variant placed on the system via, they got in via the thermostat or whatever socially engineered and admin security privileges, or login IDs. And then they find out that they installed or inserted an illegal boot image, and then it went from there. Those things have to be done very manually unless you have HPE silicon root of trust, and unless you have AMD's secure processor area execution area, you're going to be susceptible to things like the malware variants that are accessing shared cache, for instance, right? Like we talked about just a few minutes ago. So those are things that are going to free up your admin times, free up time versus, doing it in security, doing it automatically. I don't know if that's necessarily the nature of the way the question was worded, right? That's just kind of the way I interpreted the question. Hopefully that's what you intended to ask. John, any other
So,
answers?
so
Yeah,
while we're right
I
there,
can add. I can add to it. And
sure, go ahead.
well, I'll make it really quick. I mean, it's a good question because there always have been trade-offs in the industry, performance and productivity versus security. But let me just say we've come so far in that area. Like turning on memory encryption now, we've seen very little performance degradation, like 0.5%, possibly as much as 1%, 1.5% on given workloads. That's kind of the range that we've seen, which is fairly negligible and in my mind, well worth it. So hopefully that gives a little bit more specifics to the answer there.
Yeah, so as long as we're this close to the topic, Paul had asked, how concerned should we be about BIOS, firmware, et cetera, kind of vulnerabilities versus the software stuff? And what I'm hearing you say, I just want to make sure we've addressed his question head on. It sounds like it's a very real concern. But because of some of the technologies that you've shared with us about, you stand a better chance of avoiding those threats if you've got that level of like the silicon root of trust kind of stuff working on your side.
That's right, and in fact, both GrovoRub and FinSpy take advantage of assuming that the firmware can be hacked and assuming that they can inject their bootloader in there. Both of those. And those are, by the way, the number one and number two hacking rootkits right now available, right? You'll find all kinds of information about them. So, and know that HPE's Silicon Root of Trust protects you from that, right? So if those are the number one and number two hacking toolkits, and they hack in there by putting in fake firmware that allows them to inject a fake bootkit, right? It's a bootkit loader. Then yes, I'd say that this is huge, and you should be very concerned about these things.
Yeah.
You
That's
specifically
right.
talked
That's
a
where
little
we
bit
saw
about
most of the security threats at that layer.
That's right.
Go ahead.
you guys talked about supercomputing and kind of the new frontier that we're reaching there in terms of computing capacity. And you mentioned quantum computing. I think it would be really interesting for folks to just get a peek at where your heads are at as far as where we're headed. What sorts of new things? I think, Joe, you said we don't even know what questions to ask yet.
That's so
to
true.
the extent that you can, what sorts of things are on the horizon because of the supercomputing capabilities that we're generating now and in the near future?
Yeah.
Well, let me
Yeah,
just say we're
I can take a
working
stab
on some.
at that.
Oh, go ahead, John. Yeah.
Sorry, might be on a delay. Let me just kind of give a feel for this. So when we talk about this new exascale era, what does that really mean? I think that it's a new era for scientists, engineers, researchers that will be far better equipped to take advantage of this new innovation and solve really the world's biggest challenges. It's bleeding edge. And just to put things into perspective, I looked this up. You could line up the 160 fastest supercomputers today, and they collectively wouldn't be as powerful as the frontier supercomputer.
Wow.
And so, with that birth of the exascale era, yeah, just there's going to be breakthroughs in things like drug research. Think COVID-19, think cancer, new ways to tackle the climate crisis, improve energy efficiency, so many other benefits. So these technological advances will help companies do more with these just massive data sets and take advantage of things like AI. And there's really a trickle down effect is the last thing I'll say. It's not just going to live in the supercomputer. What it does is it's a forcing function to advance the software ecosystem. So all of these applications are getting optimized for AMD CPUs and GPUs on HPE platforms. And so over time, that will mean tangibly more and more benefits down at the level that you all are working with on a daily basis.
That's right. And just to add to John's comments, when we talk about high performance computing versus AI, so when we talk about HPC, so high performance computing is allowing us to take information and really run all kinds of what if analysis on those. And also, it's enabling us to radically change the interfaces in how we ask the questions and allowing the system itself to ask its own questions. But when it comes to medical research, for instance, it's not just typing questions in and it's not just speaking questions, but it's using 3D gloves and 3D goggle interfaces to, in real time, interact with a DNA strand and inject an artificial injection into the DNA strand that's then automatically simulated and run in an instant rather than do a simulation that would have taken 1.5 to 3 days before. It's done in literally a couple seconds, right? And we're able to interact with it in real time. When you look at AI, for instance, AI and what we're doing with AI and helping cities, some of the smaller cities around the world that want to get out on the front end of this, and that it's happening actually overseas more than it's happening here in the United States. We're seeing smart cities pop up left and right, and we're talking smart cities that have the vision already where they're allowing for smart cars that are going to allow for in the next 5 years, before you even back out of your garage, you're going to be typing in or saying, speaking where it is that you're planning on going, or it's automatically pulling it from your calendar, know where you're going to go. And then it lets you know when your window to leave is. And more importantly, it lets you know when you need to get up from your desk upstairs to go down and get in your car because the garage door is going to open. Your car's about to leave with or without you to get you to your doctor's appointment on time. on the pre-approved path and the pre-approved window, just like our airplanes have the windows that they get from, across the seas or across the country. The exact same thing is being implemented in our transportation grid across the United States. And it's being planned today, and it's actually being implemented in some of the smaller cities across Europe.
So
That's
I'm going to
really
have to say
exciting.
to somebody in the future, sorry I was late. I missed my car because I couldn't get through security.
Yeah, my car left without me.
Yeah.
No, that's not going to happen, obviously. But you can see where we're going in the Jetsons world that is literally becoming a reality before our eyes.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a question here about security throughout the whole life cycle. So you guys
Mm.
touched on supply chain security. You talked about boot time. Is there anything you would want to hit on as far as important things to know about day-to-day operations, and then also at the point we retire hardware?
Well, yeah, and everything that happens in between. And the everything that happens in between, James, is really where I'd have to say, you need to look at a zero trust architecture, zero trust framework. And obviously the hardware is just one big piece of that, right? But your procedures, the network security, the physical security, there is so little that's going to stop an authorized person from walking into your data center with a hard drive in their pocket, pulling out a spare hard drive or a mirrored hard drive, replacing it quickly with an identical hard drive of the same size and the same manufacturer, but a different serial number, because it's hard to fake the serial number, right? You're going to get a warning, but you're not going to get a red alert, because if it was a RAID set, right? If it was a mirrored set and you're taking out a mirrored drive, even if it's encrypted, it's only going to say that that RAID set is degraded. That's a yellow informational warning only. And if you inserted the replacement drive immediately within 3 to 4 seconds, let's say, it's going to take 30 minutes, 60 minutes at most to repair that mirrored set. And then that warning goes away. So, by 3 a.m., 4 a.m., certainly 6 a.m., when somebody gets in and actually looks at those alerts, that alert's been gone. It opened itself, it went yellow, and then it went green and went away. Then they forgot all about it. They didn't realize that a hard drive with an entire hard drive's worth of data just potentially walked out of your data center. So that's physical security that also has to be managed throughout the data lifecycle. But yes, when it goes to retiring the server, retiring the storage, we prefer to go the NIST route, right, and drill the drives. First off, you're going to rewrite. Then you're going to drill the drives. Then you're going to wipe the firmware as well. There's all kinds of things that we do at the DoD level to make sure that we're applying NIST security levels, and then also, what we need to do for DoD as well, which is above NIST.
John, is there anything you wanted to add there? I know we're having a funny little bit of lag here. I don't want you to be cut off if you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that was a very thorough response. I would reinforce again, as I said during the webinar, that really just going through the data center modernization and risk management, I really would encourage you all to look at a zero trust framework and security mindset, like leading with security. And again, we can help consult on a lot of the different aspects of this. The question is dead on, because you need to really look at the full life cycle. So that's a very lengthy conversation that we should all be having together as partners in the field.
Great, thank you. We are running out of time here, and I still have to do a little bit of wrap up. So I just want to ask you each anything you want to say, last words before we go. Start with you, Joe.
No, I just want to thank everybody for playing along at home. If you have any questions, please, please, please follow up with us, either your AMD team, your HPE team. You can reach me at JoeV, that's JOEV, at HPE.com. I'd love taking questions, going on sales calls, whether they're live or virtual. We are traveling and we are open for business. And thank you.
Yeah, and for AMD, we're so thankful that you all were here today, and we want to be that humble partner that listens about what you need. Happy to partner with you in each of the areas that we talked about to better help you advance your productivity and solve your biggest challenges. So looking forward to doing that. Thanks again.
Fantastic. Well, a couple quick things here as we're winding down. First of all, as promised, I've got a $300 Amazon gift card to give away to one lucky attendee. Today's winner is Andrew Roy from Illinois. Andrew Roy from Illinois will be reaching out, so watch for an email from us so that we can deliver that for you. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank you, Joe, for a fantastic presentation. John, thank you so much. What you guys prepared, I really enjoyed, and I think it was very informative to our audience, and we really appreciate you being here to do that. I also like to thank HPE and AMD for making this event possible. And lastly, to all of you that are here, I'm so glad you joined us. I had fun. I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned a lot. Thank you for your questions. Please feel free to pop one of those in there if you've got a last-minute question, and we will follow up. But I'm so glad you were here. Thanks for coming. This concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Joe and John, thank you.